Hello, lovely people. Welcome to Ari Talks About Music. I'm Ari, and today it is time for a review of this new Hemlocke Springs album, The Apple Tree Under the Sea. Here we have the much anticipated debut album from Naomi Udu, aka Hemlocke Springs, who I think really started to show a lot of promise around 2023, around the time that she released her EP, Going, Going, Gone, which already on just the 20-minute long EP, she established a really unique and very quirky approach to synthpop that there's nothing out there really quite like it. And so having released such a fantastic and really unique EP obviously did set the expectations quite high for what the debut full-length album would sound like. And I think it's amazing how much she has absolutely delivered on those expectations on this album, with her really just fine-tuning that style even more and managing to create something that is so unique and undeniably still of her style. But despite the overall very consistent sound of her debut EP, on this album she really does explore a hell of a lot more, and I think that the general flow from song to song is just fantastic despite how different so many of them are. I do actually really like the way that this album starts with the red apple, and I think that as far as short album intros go, this one actually provides quite a lot. I love the very vast atmosphere that it creates, and I think it does just a great job at really getting you hyped up for the album without giving too much away, which I then think leads on incredibly well to the beginning of the end, which immediately the first thing I noticed about the song is just how passionate the vocal performances are, which I think is the case not only because of just her amazing and incredibly powerful voice, but just the amount of emotion that she's able to sing with is definitely another thing that makes this a standout track for me. I like that the very subtle synthpop vibes are starting to creep in on this track, but they don't fully go for it just yet, mostly just choosing to focus on these nice little synth textures in the background, but it really does keep you waiting for when it's finally going to kick in, which on the following track, Heads, Shoulders, Knees and Ankles, it really does. I just love the very different style that this song takes, being much harder and faster than everything that came before it. And I also just find that the very witty lyrics on this track are super entertaining, as well as the absolutely incredible and super powerful vocal performances that give the song such a strong backbone. And this is of course the track where synthpop really starts to show itself as the dominant genre of the album, with so many awesome and really funky and quirky synth textures being used, and in general just the whole electronic style and the production of this track and the album in general is just so incredibly smooth. I love the very slow and brooding start on WWWWW, with just the whole atmosphere of the track building in such a slow and subtle way, but it just keeps getting better the further you go in. And again, right from the start, the absolutely brilliant and super passionate vocals are another thing that just make this track so amazing, as she really does show herself to be a vocalist quite like no other, with both just her style of singing and, like I keep saying, the amount of passion she sings with is just unrivaled. And the piano on this track as well is just a small little addition that I really like, just giving the song a little bit more of an organic sound among all of the dominating electronic sounds. And once again, Moses does hit you with a super smooth and atmospheric intro, and this one really does take its time more than the others, I think, with so many different sounds slowly making their way into the song's arrangements. And I really do think that the layering and the way in which everything is added just works so perfectly and flows incredibly well. I think that the synth solo towards the end of the song as well is just another absolutely beautiful moment, and just in general the whole outro and the way it goes through different phases I find to be so entertaining. And I just think it's really cool and interesting to see the whole song flow from one part to the next as it's all just completely seamless. Sever the Blight is a really interesting song that at first does actually feel very unsuspecting. However, it really does not take long for this track to become one of the most memorable and epic on the whole album. The vocal harmonies on this track are just absolutely brilliant, and so many of the sounds and the textures are so unique even for this album standards. And of course, I just can't go without mentioning the absolutely brilliant and super anthemic chorus that this track has, and I really love how it's able to pull off that style without being hugely loud or anything like that. It's just that good. Sense is absolutely has to be another highlight for me on this album as well. I really like the very plain and simple acoustic prelude that it comes with, but then when the main song starts, the intro immediately is already just so groovy, but still manages to have this real sense of mystery, which is a vibe that's present for the entire song. You once again, of course, have some absolutely brilliant vocal performances and just some of the most powerful deliveries that the album has, with the vocal delivery on so many parts of this track being some of the best and most powerful on the album. And even with this being one of the longer songs on the album, I think that it uses every single second of its runtime absolutely perfectly, just constantly adding more and more layers to create this really interesting, almost fantasy kind of vibe, which somehow, if the first half of the track weren't already good enough, the second half is only even more epic and euphoric than that, as this track just keeps on giving the more it goes, and I think think is just truly one of the best and most interesting synthpop songs I've heard in recent times. And then you even have, again, this slight return of a piano on this track, which again is just a very subtle element, but I think that just having that small element of an organic sound works so well. Set Me Free, I think, is an incredibly well-written song that does have a lot of really cool and interesting ideas. However, I think that the song as a whole does feel just a little bit bare. There's not quite as much going on as there is on other tracks, and especially coming straight after a track that was a little bit slower and more atmosphere focused, this one just kind of kills the album's momentum a little bit, as I think that what makes this album so great is definitely least present on this track. But then Be the Girl comes in and gives the album just about the best outro it could possibly have. The emotion that can be felt in her voice on this track is really like nothing else that the album has to offer. And then slowly building up to the chorus as well, I think that this is arguably the album's most epic and anthemic moment. I think that the synth textures on this track are absolutely some of the best and most interesting as well, with there probably being a wider palette of sounds and instruments on this track than on any of the others on the album. And just because of how much there is going on this song, I think that it gives the album such an amazing and just really explosive ending. And I think that the closing track having that style just suits the whole style of the album so well, and especially just with, again, how quirky and almost fantasy-like this track is, it's just such a good album closer. Such a strong debut album from an up-and-coming artist like this is something that I'm always so glad to see. And I think that in this particular case, for Hemlocke Springs, she is only further proving what we pretty much already knew about her, and absolutely proving herself to be one of the driving forces of modern synthpop, as just the whole vibe of this album is really quite like nothing else. And I just think that having such a unique and quirky style to her sound is definitely going to go a long way, and it does have me really excited to see how her sound is going to expand and evolve over the next few albums. And so that is why this album will be getting a 9 out of 10 from me. Thank you so much for watching this review. Please be sure to listen to this album yourself and tell me your thoughts below. Please leave a like if you liked the video, and please leave a dislike if you didn't like the video, and remember to stay hydrated.